Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 34. I am your host Dan Matson, and this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated 110% pedal to the metal to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats, and to occasionally talk about weight loss. Welcome to the show today, folks. Number 34, counting down here to number 52. It'll be a year in September or October. I think October. So welcome to the show. If this is your first time, I hope you enjoyed. If you've come back, you're liking it already, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So good to have you today. So what's with the weight loss thing? Oh, I don't know. It's, when you need to lose weight, you got to be accountable to somebody, right? So if you announce over your podcast that has, quite a few viewers out there that you need to lose 15 or 20 pounds, like I'm going to do, then hold you accountable. So that's what I got to do. I got to lose some weight because I typically gain weight in the winter, take it off in the summer, but this year the winter pack isn't coming off yet, so I got to get diligent on that. So hold me accountable, all right? If I see you down at the lake, just say, hey, how's that weight loss program going? And hold each other accountable, too, because boating's a lot more fun if you feel trim and fit, right? Okay, today's featured segment is two interviews that I did 2 weeks ago when I was in Portland, Oregon. At the Portland Yacht Club, I met with Chris Finks, who I played the interview last week on podcast 33. And Chris introduced me to two gentlemen at the Portland Yacht Club, Chuck Kellogg, who owns a 1937 53-foot bridge deck boat built in Astoria, Oregon that he completely refurbished. And he also owns a 1928 36-foot bridge deck boat called the Kaleta, which is actually the lead boat isn't the correct term. It's like the mascot for the Maritime Heritage Coalition based out of Portland, Oregon. So I've got a brief interview with Chuck talking about those boats, which he completely restored over the last, one of them took, I think, several years. They both took several years, and they're gorgeous boats. The Kaleta is still in process. You'll find out more about that. And then I also interviewed Mark Hall, who has a 1961 55-foot Chris Craft Constellation, which is a wood-planked boat. It's absolutely gorgeous. I got to take a tour of the boat when I was in Portland, and so I did a little interview with Mark. It's a lot of fun, so stick around for those two interviews. Please give me feedback on the podcast. There's a bunch of ways you can do that. You can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. You can leave a message on my voicemail hotline, 424-261-2360, 424-261-2360. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest by searching for Wooden Boat Dan there. And you can also write comments on my blog posts on my website, which you probably already know is hookedonwoodenboats.com. Because after all, it is all about being hooked on wooden boats. Well, I'd like to read some feedback I've gotten. This past week was filled with some really cool stuff. I love getting positive feedback about the podcast. It just keeps me going because it does take work and time and money. And not that I don't enjoy doing it, because I do enjoy it, but it's great to get feedback and encouragement along the way. So I got a letter in the mail on Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building letterhead from Pete Leanhoutz, who is the interim director there. And here's what he had to say. Dan, I want to express my appreciation on behalf of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building for your support of our instructors in telling their stories through your podcast program, Hooked on Wooden Boats. We've gotten all kinds of positive commentary from folks who have listened to the podcast, and it is a great way for our instructors to talk about their design philosophies and current projects. Your program is a wonderful addition to the world of wooden boats here in the Pacific Northwest. I was delighted to hear you've been invited to join the Pacific Northwest Maritime Heritage Council. Your membership is a natural, and I look forward to working with you on many different projects. Excuse me. Thanks again for your support, Pete Leanhoutz. And then he wrote on the letter, P.S., Dan, your support is most sincerely appreciated. Thanks, Pete. That's an awesome letter. I think I'm actually going to frame this one and put it up. It's on the school's letterhead, and that really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Then I got an email from a gentleman in or near Melbourne, Australia. And I was actually in Australia. Let's see, this is from Andrew. Andrew, I was in Australia in 1982. No, 1983, spring of 83. I did a 3-month trip. I was single, had my backpack and a couple thousand in the bank, and I headed out for New Zealand, Australia, and Fiji. And I spent 5 weeks in Australia, started in Sydney, worked my way up the coast to Cairns. I know it's spelled Cairns, but it's pronounced Cairns if you're over in Australia. And then I flew into Alice Springs, saw Ayers Rock, went through Cooper Pedy, and back over to Sydney. Had an absolute blast. So anyway, here's what Andrew has to say. Good day, Dan. I found your podcast through iTunes and have been listening to them one by one from the beginning over the last few weeks. Sounds like you have found your passion. I got hooked when my eldest son was 4 years old and he asked me, "Can we build a boat, Dad?" To demonstrate to him why we couldn't, I Googled how to build a boat just to show him how much work it is. Wasn't I surprised when I found out how easy it could be? He and I built a plywood rowboat that summer, and I had an article published about it in a boat building magazine. And then he gives a reference here. And then he goes on to say, 3 years later, my second son turned 4 and wanted his own boat, so we built a sailboat to one of Phil Bolger's designs. That was 3 years ago, and guess what? My daughter has turned 4 and is demanding a boat of her own. I love it. We started building a Eureka canoe from Michael Storer's design last weekend. Meanwhile, I have been building a boat for myself, a 25-foot clinker ply yawl, again of Phil Bolger design. And then he gives some website addresses here that have pictures. Looking forward to your future podcasts and to your emails. Regards, Andrew Yen in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you so much, Andrew, for those kind comments. It's great to hear from you. He also sent me a picture of one of his boats. Really pretty boat. So great job. I love it that you're building boats with your kids. That's such a cool project to do together, especially when the kids are young. Teach them those skills, and they'll be with them for life. One other email I wanted to read here from David White, and calls himself Driver Dave here. Greetings, Dan. I'm really enjoying your podcast. I wish I had as much spare time to build a wooden boat as I do to listen to your podcasts. I drive a truck for a living and have done so for 31 years. It leaves me little time for important things in life such as boats. The only salt water I am exposed to is the salt water spraying off the road from the truck in front of me during the winter. That's a bummer. I have a set of plans for an 11.5-foot lap-strake Norwegian pram of Simon Watt's design. I have modest woodworking skills and have never built a boat before. I'm wondering if I can get it done during 1 week this July. I have a ready access to 3/4-inch white pine boards of various dimensions at the lumberyard, but the plans call for half-inch dimensions. I don't want to order marine plywood with the associated cost. Do you have any ideas of thinner planks that could be used? I might be able to plane the 3/4 down to half, but that is a waste. The plans also mention that 3/8 would be adequate, as it will be car-topped. Weight is an issue. I hear you had problems with your home-built rabbet plane, so I reckon I'll have to buy that plane myself. What do you think about lap-strake joints? Can I really get away with bedding compound, or should I resort to epoxy? I heard on one of your podcasts that your guest was talking about polyurethane door window caulk as being much cheaper and absolutely reliable. Would this do the trick? I guess another option would be to have Mr. Freiberg, as in Eric Freiberg from North Fjord Boats, build it for me. I wonder how much that would cost. I'd like to be able to use the boat this October. I'm not sure I trust my woodworking skills, and I'm not a real strong swimmer. Again, I enjoy your podcasts, and I'm trying to soak up information like the garboard plank in a caravel boat. I reckon if I soak up enough information, maybe that'll help keep the water out. By the way, brother, I appreciate your faith. Remember, even Jesus liked boats. God bless, Driver Dave. Thanks, Dave, for that great email, and you got a lot of questions there. And glad you acknowledged my faith, because I am a Christian, and I don't talk a lot about it, but it's just part of my life, so sometimes I'll mention it. And as far as your questions go, you're wondering about using 3/4-inch white pine boards. What do I think about lapstrake? Epoxying the joints versus using a bedding compound. Well, I think one thing is if you're going to epoxy your lapstrake joints, you want to use a very stable wood such as a marine plywood. If you use just a regular wood species like a pine or cedar or something like that, the wood is going to move with temperature and water moisture changes. And so that's the whole purpose of the bedding compound, is it seals that joint that's kind of moving. But if you try to epoxy that regular wood together, it might break apart or cause leaks or that sort of thing. So there's one answer there. Yeah, so use a bedding compound, and I'll have to think about some of these other things here, and I'll probably shoot an email back to you. So thanks again, Dave, for your comments. Good to hear from you. Let's see. Yeah, I guess next is our interview. My interviews that I did at the Portland Yacht Club with Chuck Kellogg and Mark Hall, who have some gorgeous wooden boats. And we're going to go ahead and roll the interview, so take it away, guys. So it is April 28th, I think, 2012. I'm here with Chuck Kellogg. We're at the Portland Yacht Club inside a boathouse, or houseboat. Boathouse. Standing next to a boat called Kaleta that Chuck's been working on. Chuck, tell me about this boat.
Well, I got hold of it about a year ago in April, and it's been just a year since we started this project. And but I had to influence the guy who had a yard where I could put it on the land. I had to convince him that it wouldn't fall apart. And then I had to get a truck driver to move it from Camas to here, and I had to agree to him that I would pay him $1,000 in advance to move it on a trailer, and if it fell apart on the way down the road, he wasn't responsible. And then I found a couple of guys, thanks to Chris Finks, that said they'd work on the boat. So all three of them were in. I drove them to the site, and they agreed, well, okay, we'll do the project. So off we went and started. And it took about a year to get, and we only went up to the gunnel boards as far as the woodwork goes, because from there up is work that you can do in the water.
Mm-hmm. So what year was this boat built?
This was built in 1928 at a yard called Martinac Marine, which is in Tacoma, and it is still there. I talked to the third generation who still runs the yard, and they're building Navy ships now. And this was one of about 4 that they built like this in 1928. And this design, this bridge deck design, where the bow of the boat is up high like this and it's swooped down, and they call those bridge deck boats. And a lot of the boats in this age bracket were bridge decks, just like the Phantom is a bridge deck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because it was popular at the time, because your cabin was up fairly high. And they were strictly designed for the Northwest, for rainy conditions where you had cover. The whole boat was covered, so you'd be out of the weather.
Yeah.
So, then the interesting thing was that Joe Martinac, the original owner of Martinac Marine, I found out that he was he joined the Navy and became a PT boat captain. And I'm involved with the PT boat here in Portland.
Mm.
And we're sort of waiting for Grandma to send us some pictures.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Of the PT boat he was on, plus maybe some more pictures of this.
Yeah, now what length is the Kaleta?
This is 36 feet.
36 feet. What's the beam on it?
Beam is about 11 feet, which is fairly narrow.
Fairly narrow beam, isn't it?
Which is the way they built them back then.
Yeah. And who was the first owner of this boat, Chuck?
Well, the story I get is that it was the mayor of Bremerton, and he had it, and that's about all I can get out of it. The name is somewhere in some paperwork, but I don't have it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But eventually we'll get to. I made up a big catalog full of all the pictures. Did you see it down there?
I did, yeah.
Well, that tells the whole story, and the only thing I don't have is the original owner and maybe how many owners it went through. But I do have a stack of logbooks that talk about each trip they took, and each page in the logbooks are a trip.
Wow.
And it had a little gas engine in it, and I was thinking of keeping that gas engine and overhauling it and using it. But on every page there was an incident with why the engine wouldn't start, and why the spark plugs were bad, and why the coil needed to be fixed, and why all those things that we all went through when we used old boats, or even when I was a kid in this yacht club here. Why the guys would have to warm up their boats for 20 minutes before they could go anywhere. You had to get the boat up to temperature. And now I put a diesel engine in here, and the book says in the diesel engine, you should start it and go.
Really?
And let it warm up on the way. They all tell you that. They tell you that that's just diesel.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about a bilge blower either, do you?
No, you don't, but I have a bilge blower in the boat.
Do you? Yeah. Very cool. So you replaced a lot of the planking and frames, and you've done major work on this boat.
We did what they call a total restoration, and I'm lucky because the cabin is all teak, whereas the hull was fir. The cabin is all teak, and it was very popular in those days. Everybody used teak cabin structure with mahogany on the inside. And the teak, even when it has no varnish at all on it, it still looks good. It still has a nice look to it.
Yeah.
And I took this board right here and sanded it. I sanded this myself just a couple of days ago, and I sanded it for like a minute. And look at how the color came back.
Yeah. So why did they use teak on the outside, Chuck?
Well, because of number one, they had a lot of it at the time.
Yeah.
The yards were full of teak, and that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty wood. It works good. It doesn't rot. You get rotty. The fir rots easily.
Yeah.
You can stick a fir pole in the ground. I used to raise cattle, and you stick a fir pole in the ground, and the next year the bottom's rotting off.
Yeah.
In 1 year.
Yeah. Right.
But teak seems to stand up against. Teak's got a lot of oil in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when you rub the surface, you get the grayness off, which sort of protects it.
Yeah.
And then it comes back easy.
Yeah. So right next door here, you've got another boat called the Phantom. So tell me about that boat.
Well, that boat was built in 1936, which was 10 years newer than this boat. And so that's why the windows are slanted a little bit.
Oh.
Because they started doing little curvy things back then. Now on this boat, the only thing that's curved are these windows.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice that all the windows are curved, which gives it
the top panel.
But that's the only thing that gives it any class at all. Whereas in that boat, they curved the windows, plus they curved the doors and the front and the back, and they tried to make a few more things. And they put a brow out on the front of the boat. But that one was built in 36, and it was built in Astoria. And the builder built 5 of those boats, and they all have disappeared, except I have the only one that is left out of the group. And that boat was a derelict, and 4 of us here in the club went to see it many times as it was sitting in a yard in the water, but was undercover. But it was totally, if the engines were gone, it was a total derelict, and we kept drawing straws to see who would want to offer some money for it and resurrect it. And eventually I think I lost, because at first I wasn't interested, and then as time went on, we kept going back and looking at it with Mike Keene, George Beale, and one other member here.
Where was the boat at?
It was in Kalama, which is about halfway down the river. And the story about the boat was that a bunch of drunks had it, and they would go commercial fishing. And the last story we heard was that the daughter that I talked to, she told me that they, and she used to live on the boat with her dad, or camp on it, and took care of her dad because he was a drunk and he'd fall down a lot, and she'd have to kind of watch out for him. And she said one night they were over at, they were moored over at Chinook, Washington, on the Washington side of the Columbia. And then the taverns all dried up, so they decided to go over to Astoria because the taverns were still open all night or something. So they were on their way over there, and they ran aground on Desdemona Sands. And you know where that is. If you go across the bridge, that on low tide, that's where they ran into the Desdemona. And the thing became stuck in the mud. And the Coast Guard came out and pulled them off. And then a couple hours later, they called the Coast Guard again and said they're stuck back on the sands. And so the Coast Guard said, you'll have to wait till morning because we're busy. And anyway, then they ruined one engine at that trip, and so forth and so on. And then the end of that story was that the daughter, her dad fell down one night, and she had to go down to the boat where the guys were all using it as a flop house. And she had to go get him. She was like 19 years old, and she went to get him, and she was hauling him up the stairs, and he fell down a bunch of times and broke some ribs. And then they finally had to call the hospital or the ambulance to get him to the hospital because he was pretty busted up, which was pretty typical. But she was worried about her dad all the time. Well, then the ambulance guy came down there, and he was helping him get him in the ambulance, and he worried about the gal. He said, what are you going to do? And she said, well, I'm going to hang around with these guys. And he said, why don't you come with me, and I'll take you home or something. Well, the ambulance driver, when she was telling me this story at a restaurant when I was going to purchase the boat, I said, well, what happened to the ambulance driver? She said, he's sitting next to me. I married him. And she said he saved my life because he took me away from that drunken crowd and took care of me, and I married him. And she then and she's a nice looking lady, and she was now the power of attorney for her father for his stuff, and he was in a nursing home. And couldn't walk anymore and so forth. So anyway, she was able to sell the boat. So I made her an offer, and she took it.
Wow.
And then I went down to the boat, and one of her brothers was down there sanding on the boat.
After you bought it.
But it was that same day. And he was sanding on the side of the boat, and he was gouging into it with sanding paper, and I said, well, I bought the boat from your sister, so you're going to have to quit. And he got upset, but he said, well, I just got out of penitentiary. And I said, well, you mean like jail? And he said, no, penitentiary is different than jail. He explained to me what it was all about.
Yeah.
Penitentiary, you've been a real bad boy. But jail is just a place to keep you over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, but I'm in recovery now, and I'm doing all this, and I'm doing all that. And I was so lucky to get that boat out of his hands, because he was in the process of putting knotty pine wood inside.
Oh.
You know what knotty pine is.
Yeah, you put in your cabin, right?
You've seen it in
Up on
boats.
the mountains, yeah.
You've seen it before.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the main story of the boat. And then we finally got it up here, and I started restoring it, and I hired a couple of guys to help.
Yeah.
But that was when I was a little younger, and I could do a lot of the work myself. But now my hands have gone, and you can see what's going on here.
Hmm.
You know what that is? It's a
No.
ganglia cyst from too much wiggling around. Anyway.
Yeah. So, do you know who the first owner of that boat was? Phantom?
I showed you that picture.
Yeah.
Dr. Haworth, who was a doctor here at the club, he had it built in Astoria. And they built it in Astoria. And they left it there through the winter. And in January, they launched it on about the middle of January down in Astoria. And then a whole bunch of the other club members came down and met him, and then they all left from there to go north in January, up the coast.
Up the Washington coast.
In 1936.
Wow.
And two of the daughters were on board, who are still around, and two of the daughters told me the story about their job was to stack the tuna fish on the front of the bow and the salmon on the back, and they got a nickel to cleaning those fish. And these were young teenage girls at the time, but they weren't, and all they had for navigation was a direction finder that is still on the boat, and the old-fashioned, they didn't have a depth finder, they had a range finder, and then which locked onto radio beams.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd get KGW here in Portland, and the wand would show you that direction, because it was a circle, and you'd aim it, and you'd draw a line on the chart, and you'd say, well, we're there, and then you'd go get the Seattle KGO or whatever it was, and you'd get that line, and you'd cross it on the chart,
triangulate,
and you say we're within 20 miles of this spot. That's how close, as far as they were concerned. 20 miles was good enough to know where you were. Anyway, they used to take it north, and I think the boat went north 17 times, because one of the daughters told me that. And that's when the daughters became old enough to where they finally told their father, we're not going anymore, Dad. We're done.
How far north did they go with it?
Oh, they'd go all up around Victoria and around the island,
San Juan Islands.
San Juan Islands, all through there.
Yeah.
Which the club still does. The guys still wander around up there all the time. Every summer, they all head up there.
Yeah. So you grew up in the Portland Yacht Club? Your parents were in?
Right here.
Is that right? Wow.
And when you were a kid here in the club, we had to all be sailors. As a kid, Saturday, everybody would show up here at the club, and there was no other activities anywhere, So you'd come here, and they'd pick you to go onto a sailboat and be crew, and you'd learn how to sail a boat.
Really?
And as time went on, we sailed our own little boats. The little boats called a Flattie. They were designed by Gary, who was a guy up in Seattle area who designed a lot of boats. And he designed this little 18-foot boat called a Flattie. It was built out of plywood, and the bottom was flat. And had a centerboard, and we'd go out and sail and race, and it was very popular because everybody around the Northwest was racing those boats, and we'd go to different races at different times of the year.
Really fun.
And it was a neat way to grow up.
Yeah, I bet.
But see, those were the days when nobody wore gloves when you were a sailor. There were no winches on boats, no power winches, no cranks, and you hang on. You hung on to the mainsail with one hand, the jib with the other hand, and your foot was probably on the rudder. And that's the way they sailed all the boats. And now, of course, they've got, like Bo Nab, Chris?
Yep, Bo Nab.
Everything's electric. He sails this big boat by himself, and he just pushes the buttons, and the mainsail goes in and out.
Oh, really?
And the jib goes over here. Da, 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 da. Yeah.
Not the same, is it?
No.
No.
Well, I got to run.
Okay.
Really
thanks for your time, Chuck. I appreciate it. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you.
So it is April 28th. I am with Mark Hall, and we're on the aft deck of a 1961 Chris Craft Constellation 55-foot beautiful boat, and Mark is working on his teak back here. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
So Mark, what is it about wooden boats that you love? Let's get right to the meat of this.
Yeah, right to the meat. When I was a young man, probably 31, 32 years old, I was doing yard work. I've always liked to work with my hands on the weekends. I'm a professional during the week, and I just like doing stuff with my hands. So I was working in the yard doing some honeydew stuff, and I loaded my pickup truck up with some yard debris and went down to a place called Universal Recycling, where they take the yard debris and they turn it into mulch and resell it to people. So I paid my $5 and at the counter, and they said, take your load around the big pile where the grinding machine is. So I took my car, I went around the big pile, which was like a little mountain, and there, listing on its side, was probably a 32 or a 34 foot wooden boat. All the running gear was out of it, all the glass was out of it, all the electronics, everything. It was just the shell of a 34 foot wooden boat. And I was so astonished. That wooden boat was getting ready to be turned into bark dust and go on somebody's front lawn. And I thought to myself, those wooden boats should be preserved and saved. So that started my intense love affair searching for a beautiful old wood boat.
How long ago was that, Mark?
That was probably in 1985.
Yeah, 1985. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I didn't get my first wooden boat. I started riding motorcycles, and I had Harleys, and it just was too dangerous. It was, get yourself killed real easy. So I had a friend that had a 1963 25-foot Owens, and I insured it. And it had a baby blue hull with mahogany. And he'd had it for probably 20 years, and I bought that wood boat. It had a 283 in it, and that was my first wooden boat.
Here on the Columbia River?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here on the Columbia, yeah. And then from there, that was in 98. 2 years later, I bought a 1955 34-foot Richardson sedan. And I started...
What was the name of that boat?
All my boats have been Hollywood.
Okay.
But before it was... I can't remember what the...
Because we had a 1955 38-foot Richardson on the river here.
Did it have a fly bridge?
No. Didn't have. It was a sedan.
Yeah, a sedan. And so there was another one on the river. As a matter of fact, I wanted to buy it, and it had a fly bridge. So... It's sold.
That one's still that's a map.
No. Well, it was over here. It looks like it's going to sink. Anyways, it got sold, and so I bought the 34 sedan, and I have a client, and he is an old boatwright hippie dude, long hair. All he's done his entire life is worked on wood boats. So I called him up and I said, "Hey, I just bought this Richardson, and let's put a fly bridge on it."
Cool.
And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, let's put a fly bridge on it." So we started this. I have made a small fortune restoring old wood boats. I started with a large fortune. So we started working on that project. We put a steering station upstairs, controls upstairs, ran a tube down through the, when you go into a Grand Banks, you see that metal shiny tube. I did that to my controls and everything, and so we did that. And I got that boat all fixed up and decided I didn't. I was at Columbia River Yacht Club with that boat, and we were there for about 3 years, and I kind of lost interest in that boat. I sold the boat, quit Columbia River, and I just was kind of on the fringe there for a little while. My buddies over at Columbia Rivers, they all had big glass boats, and we would go out and socialize and do fun things with them. So that lasted for a little bit, and then I got the bug again, and this time I wanted to go the deluxe of the deluxe. So I was after Chris Craft this time. I wanted to own a Chris Craft. So I found a Chris Craft up on Lake Washington. It was a 36 1960 Chris Craft. It had twin marine power V8s in it. It was all there, but it was in poor condition. But it had the deluxe package. This was the deluxe package to get the teak for the boat. That was, I think, a $1,500 option back then to get the teak. So, so I bought that boat, put it on a trailer, and took it to Rocky Point Marina. They put it in the slings and dropped it in the water and tied it up. And 2 hours later, I was there to see my boat, and it had almost sunk. Because once they go out of the water, they don't like that at all.
Oh, yeah.
And then you put all that pressure on the slings. She doesn't like that at all. And I got there, and literally the boat, the water was up to the. They get the gulls. I got shit. My boat is sinking, and I don't know if you've ever been to Rocky Point, but it's quite a community there. A lot of people live there, so it's a diehard boating little.
Where's that
thing. At? Rocky Point Marina. Oh, it's in the Multnomah Channel.
Oh, okay.
So, anyways, this dude comes over and he has an electric, like an agricultural pump. They stick that thing and we pump that water out, and oh baby. So, anyways, so we started working on that, and that boat was a gigantic job because every inch of that boat, from the interior to the decks to the steering station, all that stuff, I stripped that boat completely.
That thing was spectacular, though.
Oh, dude, that took best of show at the Chris Craft Rendezvous 2 years ago. The guy that I sold it to, he spent another $30,000 on it.
What's her name now?
It's the Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie.
Look it up.
I've seen it.
It's a beautiful boat.
I can't remember the name.
So, anyways, repowered that thing. I have a friend over at Tyee that is a mechanic, works for the gas company, and we went and we lifted the engines out. We put them in a pickup truck and took them over to his house. And, we backed the pickup truck in. He has a little hook in his garage, dropped down, put it on the engine stand. We took those marine powers, those 350s. He put the L8 head or pistons in them. Corvette pistons in them. We put Kodiak manifolds on them. We put Holley carburetors and power pack heads. So, it wasn't like a balanced and blueprinted type of thing, but we just put all the modern type performance things on those engines. Brought them back, stuck them in there, and the boat was all good to go and all dressed up. And so, the boat is just gorgeous boat and had the convertible top on it. So I had that for maybe a couple days, and I kept on thinking, boy, I wonder what this boat will do. And Roger says, well, don't bring it up past 2,500 until you have like 20 hours on the motors or something. But I just wanted to know. So I had like 18 hours on those motors, and the temptation was too much. So I took it out here in the channel, and I had a new Lowrance GPS, depth finder thing on there. So I took it out there by myself, and I said, let's see what the pony does. So we were 22,000, 2,500, 2,800. All of a sudden, I'm at like 3,200, and I'm going 33 miles an hour speed over ground on that boat. And I still had more juice in there. There was still more horses. That pony wasn't. The pony was not doing the full trick.
Wow. That was in the 36-footer.
That was in that 36. Oh, that boat rocked.
That's fast.
Oh, for a boat like that? Jeez. So anyways, I had that boat, very happy with the boat, but we started boating with these guys down here at the club, and everybody here had a big boat. So we would go to the outings and everything, and my wife wouldn't spend the night on this boat. Dudes, they wouldn't spend the night on the boat because the boat didn't have, it had a shower and everything, but it didn't have a separate bedroom and all that kind of stuff. So we'd always go home, and we didn't have the tender. We didn't have a dinghy, and that was a real drawback with boating with this group of people, because everybody ties together, and then they have the little dinghy to go back and forth to wherever they go.
Yeah.
So this one Friday night, I'm up at the club, and a good-looking man in a blazer comes up to me, and I'm up standing there at the bar, and he says, "Well, can I buy you a drink?" And I said, "Well, sure." He goes, "You should come down and check out my boat. It's for sale. It's the Cruiser. Cruise Her." I said, "Dude, I just got done fixing up a boat. I don't need a boat." So, "Oh, no." And he goes, "No, go down to the house. It's J4. The lock, the code is 1961. You'd really like it." And I don't want to look at your boat. So I'm down here. I was on H1, and I was down one Saturday afternoon, just doing my chores and everything, and my curiosity just got the best of me. So I went down, I put the code in, I got the key, and I opened the door, and I looked at this thing, and I said, "Oh my God." I looked at this, and I go, "Wow." And so I went, and he had done quite a bit of work to it, and it looked really, it was well kept. It was original, but it was well kept. And I just would look through, and I looked at all the systems, and I thought, oh man, this would be so much work. Oh no, I am so happy I have my little boat. It's all done, and everything's nice and pretty, and I'd have to do this, and I'd have to do that. But I kept on coming back. Another week later, I came back, and I looked in it again, and I looked and looked and looked and looked. And I said, one day, it was Saturday, I said, I'm crazy. So I got my car. I drove over to the island to Verco Yacht Sales, and Bob Krause is sitting there at the desk.
Bobby was Mr. Chris Kraft.
Yeah, and so he's sitting there and he goes, "Yeah, can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to buy the Cruiser." And he "You want to see it?" "Oh, I've seen it. I want to buy it." And so he's kind of like bewildered. Yeah, I mean, yacht brokers, they have to keep on taking you and twisting your arm and buying you stuff and showing boats, and here someone just walks in and I'm going to buy the Cruiser. So anyways, I make my deal, and now I own. It all comes together, and I told Jeff, conditions of buying the boat, I have to have the house too. I'm not going to buy the boat without the house. So if we can't figure out a way to do that whoop-de-doo, it ain't going to happen. Because this boat, out in the open for 8 months, is going to look like a glazed donut. The only reason this boat's alive today, it's in cold, fresh water, undercover. Yeah. That's the only reason it's in existence today. So anyways, I get it, and now I'm the proud owner of 2 Chris Crafts. So Bob gets the listing on the Hollywood, the first Hollywood.
That's the 36-footer.
The first dude comes down from Seattle. I want it. I'll take it. Boom, it's gone. I'm a 2-boat owner for 2 weeks. And that boat is gone. And then my little relationship with this started.
So you got this boat 4 years ago, Mark?
Yeah. 4 years ago.
Okay.
So the first thing, I get the boat. It has the 8V71s, which are the motors of choice, the holy grail of diesel motors. They use those motors. They put in Greyhound buses. They put them in semi-trucks. They would use them for agricultural pumps for irrigation. One of the Silver 92s is what they call them. And just, a durable 350 horse V8 supercharged 2-stroke naturally aspirated diesel.
Wow.
Is what those motors are. So everybody says, that motor will go 20,000 hours at 2,400 RPM continuously and stay at 185 degrees until, that's what they're built to do. That's what they do. This boat, 1961, there's 2,100 hours on these motors. All you have to do is just go like this on the starter. Bam! They're on. They don't even do a full revolution. You just go, and they're on. I mean, never a whimper out of these engines. Never any problem.
Wow.
So it had a Waukesha 5-cylinder 10 kW genset. And I think it looked as big as the motor in my Datsun pickup truck. That's how big that genset motor was. And I said, that thing, you turn it on. Number one, 10 kW is twice as much as what I'd ever use on this boat because we don't have air conditioning or anything like that. And it was noisy and it took up a lot of space down there in the in the engine room. So I said to Ken, okay, we're getting rid of that Waukesha and I'm getting a nice little 6.5 kW Kohler. A 3-cylinder, turns at 1,800 RPMs. That's as quiet as a electric shaver. So that's the plan now. That is our plan. So now, how do we get the engines out of this boat? Your boat, they're back here, right?
They're back there. Yeah,
okay.
right.
Mine are up there.
Yeah, I know.
So what we do, if you notice that vinyl top there, that's all marine plywood screwed down and blah, blah, blah. But the way they put the engines in and out of this boat is you would, you'd access that through those panels. So they ain't coming out without a fight. Once those engines are in, they're meant to be in. They, if you rebuild those, they don't want you to take the blocks out. You can take the heads and stuff, but they're saying these blocks are going to go forever. So we cut a hole across that whole thing, like this wide, the entire way. And so then we take the boat down here to Cook Engine, and they drop a crane, and we pull the Waukesha out, through that hole into the parking lot and drop the other one in. So that first year, we did quite a bit of work to get it up to where it is now, but
yeah. So what do you know about the history of the boat, Mark, early on? Do you know anything?
It was owned by a lumber guy here in town named Walt Mashosky. And he, I think he owned Hampton Lumber, or he owned a lumber mill here. And the boat was called Board Feet. And it was really odd because we bought the boat. No, he didn't work for. He had his own place. I can't remember what his business was called. But Debbie's dad, my wife's dad, worked for Hampton Lumber. So we bought the boat, and my wife called her parents. Oh, Mark just bought this beautiful big Chris Craft. You guys got to come down. Got to come down and see the boat. So they come down, and Vern gets up and he walks on the boat. He looks around. And he goes, "I've been on this boat." We look at him. What? Yeah, I've been on this boat. This is Walt Mashofsky's boat, isn't it? He goes. We were out on this boat on the river, and a guy fell off, and I got on the swim platform, and I pulled him out right there. And this is from in the 60s, because he sold lumber for Hampton Lumber. Debbie's dad did. And and Walt was, he would take the sales reps or whatever, the people that he did business with. So that was so weird. So he'd already been on the boat once. So anyways, it went from the Mashofsky family to Jeff Sessions. I think in Portland, I am the third owner of the boat since the boat has been here at the club. And I think the boat has been here at the club since 1964.
At the Portland Yacht Club.
It's Portland Yacht Club, yeah. It was built in Florida.
Okay.
And then I don't know too much of the history from 1964, but the Mashofsky family is still in town, and I have talked to the son-in-law.
It was delivered to Staff Jennings, wasn't it sold through Staff Jennings?
No, I think I don't have that paperwork. I think you can get that paperwork
at the archives.
For the Newport News or the Chris Craft people can dig that up, but I don't have that paperwork.
Very good. Well, I appreciate your time today, Mark. Any parting comments for our wooden boat listeners?
Dude, I've talked too much as it is. So
okay, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks again to Chuck and Mark for letting me do those interviews with you at the Portland Yacht Club. It's awesome, the boats you guys have, and the fact that you've kept older boats alive and kicking and looking really good is really fun. Preserving our maritime history, which is really cool, and you guys had fun stories, so thanks again for letting me interview you. Next week will be an interview with Peter Krim of the Wind and Oar Boat School in Portland, Oregon. This is a school that Peter started last year, and I'm going to let him give you all the gory details about that next week, so be sure and tune in. I'd love it if you would subscribe to my e-news. You can do that by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe, or by going to my homepage and in the upper right-hand corner, clicking on the subscribe button. And if you do that, you'll receive an email from me about once a month with some news, resources, fun things. And it's also a way for us to connect and do some emailing back and forth about boats. The other thing you can do to subscribe is go to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast feed so it automatically shows up on your computer, your iPad, your iPod, your iPhone, your Droid phone, your MP3 player, whatever you've got. If you go to iTunes Store to the podcast section and search for Hooked on Wooden Boats, then there's a button you can subscribe to there. Or you can subscribe on my website. Look for the little RSS button, which is a little orange button. And RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication. I don't know if it's as simple as they say, but it does work good. So please subscribe. And if you like the show, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show and me a little bit, one way you can do that is if you do any purchasing through Amazon. If you go to my website and click on the resource page, click on any item on that page, that'll take you to Amazon. And if you make any purchase of anything on Amazon, not just what I show on my page, and I get paid a small commission. Also on my homepage of my website, there's a little button for Jamestown Distributors, who sells boat building supplies and marine supplies, epoxy, a lot of things that you can use for boat building and repair and maintenance and so on. If you click on that and go to their site and make a purchase, I get paid a small commission there too. So if you'd like to support the show, that's a couple ways to do it. I appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in today, folks. It's been great to have you. Have a great week. Get out on the water, have some fun, build your boat, varnish your boat, do all that cool stuff. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. We'll talk again soon. Take care.